So my parents got divorced before I was even 2 years old. I remember I would go to friends' houses, right? And they would have a father and a mother. And when I had a boyfriend in high school, I would see his father and mother, and I would kind of try to adopt, like, oh, that's what a father figure is. I was trying to have some kind of worth to, subconsciously show that even though he wasn't in my life, I was subconsciously probably trying to show him or my mom or whoever that I was worth it. I was so boggled by the response that you can really just deny your flesh and blood. I felt kind of like I was strong at that moment for some reason. Like I wasn't breaking down. There's a time that I saw him before that was when I had offered him those tickets to the pageant. And that was just overwhelmingly just crushing. I remember when you were a first-time dad, you probably wanted to make sure your child was fed, where they were dry, they were clothed, they had the toys they wanted. You didn't want them to cry in public because they'd say that you were a bad parent, right? You're like, oh my gosh, this child's crying. But in actuality, a lot of times we often do too much. We over anticipate what they need. And so we have a lot of these kids who are growing up they should be saying your first word by 1 year. You should be combining 2 words, 3 words by 2 years, and then speaking in short sentences by 3. There's this whole spectrum. Some kids progress faster and some kids progress slower.
Welcome to the Daughter Podcast, where fathers become everyday heroes in their daughters' lives. Grow, evolve, and lead with love. Here's your host, Oscar.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back. This is Oscar here, your local growing girl dad. Back here on another episode with an awesome guest. Miss Jeaneen Tang today is going to give us her experience and her perspective as a daughter. Jeaneen, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing amazing. Thank you for having me on your podcast today, Oscar.
We talked before, and in our conversation, I remember telling you, I'm like, I didn't know how when I first read your profile, I was like, wow, I haven't had any dad ask for like a speech therapist or anything like that, right? And I was like, I don't know how we fit this in, but I always like talking to people and finding perspectives, right? And so we got on a phone call, and you have an amazing and hard story that I think our community can and will benefit from.
Thank you.
Yes. And so before we get started with that, tell us a little about Jeaneen and who you are, where you're from, and kind of a little bit of your background.
Amazing. So right now I'm in Los Angeles, and it's been almost 20 years in Los Angeles, which is crazy. Yeah. But originally from Honolulu, Hawaii. And I grew up and, living in Hawaii and growing up there, you really take it for granted until you move away. Right? It's so beautiful. You could run around after school and play till like the sundown and go home and have dinner with your family and everything. And you felt very safe. Where like Los Angeles, I have an almost 13-year-old son, and I would never tell him, oh, go down the street and have fun.
Right. Oh yeah. LA. No.
Yeah, right. And so I decided to move to Los Angeles 20 years ago. I was already a speech therapist. I've been a speech therapist for almost 24 years now. Actually, 24 years, exactly. And I had decided I wanted to do acting. I was like, I'm going to be an actor. So I moved up here, and thank goodness I was already a speech therapist, because making it here as an actor is like, it's like you need luck, you need talent, you need connections, you need all kinds of things, and perseverance, and like a really thick skin. And, I was trying to do waitressing while I was trying to do acting. And I was like, I'm working 60 or 70 hours a week trying to waitress, and let me just get my license in Los Angeles, and I could work half the amount of time and, still make the same amount of money.
Right.
And so I really love speech therapy. I'm really glad that I fell into it in a way. I didn't really know what I wanted to do exactly when I was going to school. I thought maybe I wanted to be a teacher. And I thought maybe I wanted to be a physical therapist because I wanted to help people. And I played sports and everything like that. And I love English literature. So I did my undergraduate degree in that. And I knew I needed a master's degree to be a therapist, a physical therapist. But when it came time to apply for grad school, I was like, well, do I want to do physical therapy? Do I want to be an English professor? What else do I want to do? And someone mentioned speech therapy, and I'm glad they did, because I was going to school in Oregon at the time for my undergraduate degree, and my school back home, University of Hawaii in Manoa, had a graduate degree for speech therapy. So I could actually go home, go to grad school, and then, be a part of the community and be helpful in that sense. I worked in the schools there for 4 years before I decided I wanted to do acting. And then I moved up here to Los Angeles, and then I worked here in the schools for 4 years, and I switched over to early intervention, which is 0 to 3 years old. And then I've been doing that since 2010, along with working with adults. So I do both ends of the population, very young people and very elderly people as well. And I love it. And people say, why do you do both? And I'm like, because I love both populations, and I don't think that I would love to only do one. I feel like I'm missing out on the other one. So I kind of like to do a balance of both. And, it's been a really great career so far. And like you said, I have a crazy story and amazing story. And part of that is my son, who was born in 2012. And unfortunately in 2013, he had a fall from our bed and had a brain injury. And then he had a stroke from the swelling in his brain. And so, like I said, he's going to be 13 next month. And, although he's really, really functional, originally they thought he might never walk or talk because the injury was so bad. And, he's learned how to compensate a lot of ways physically, but he still doesn't use his right arm or hand. And, I kind of do speech therapy with him every day, whether he knows it or not. So I'm very fortunate that I kind of picked this career that I could help my son the best way possible.
It's crazy how things kind of work out that way sometimes, right? Like you probably didn't know when you're going into speech therapy that would be something that later on in your life you can provide for your son. That's amazing. And so it's also interesting to me that you're talking to the Daughtered podcast and the Daughtered community, because when I think of speech therapy, language training, for example, I think of men, this guy, right, dragging my knuckles and trying to figure out the language that is raising my daughters, right? And even, being able to pick up what my wife may be or may not be saying, because sometimes it's a different language. And then sometimes we have to be cognizant and learn how to use that same language, if that makes any sense, right? And so, again, as we talked before, and I thought about, well, how do we connect this to our community? It just everything kind of started to come in play. And then your story, when you gave it to me, I mean, I couldn't stop thinking about that. I told my wife this story, and I was just like, it's an amazing story. So I'm excited for you to share that story with us.
There's a company extremely dedicated to restoring the dignity of hard work and the relentless pursuit of greatness. That company is Fuel Hunt, and I am honored and humbled to have them as our sponsor. They have built a community that is all about choosing discipline over comfort and taking pride in the journey, because comfort is a slow death. Their clothing isn't just apparel or fight gear, it is our uniform. 100% American made, Fuel Hunt clothing is a daily reminder for me and those around me that I am committed to being among the few who truly hunt for their goals. Join the movement today and wear your ambition proudly. Everybody wants to eat, but only a few will hunt. Follow the link in the show notes and use GrillDad at checkout for 10% off your purchase.
We'll start. So you went and got to LA already with speech therapy in your background, wanting to be an actress. That seemed like a tough road. But unlike some of these folks that go to LA, you had a really good backup plan. And so speech therapy was able to do that. Now, what I didn't catch was you were in Oregon doing your schooling. Did you end up going back to Hawaii and finishing your speech therapy, or did you just finish there and then start there in LA?
Yeah, so my freshman, sophomore year, I was still in Hawaii. I went to the University of Hawaii. And then my junior, senior year, I went to Pacific University in Forest Grove, Oregon.
Gotcha.
It was a great school and everything. And for my graduate degree, I went back to the University of Hawaii to get my master's degree in speech language pathology and a minor in audiology. And then I worked for the school district there. And at the time, it was great because the Department of Education, they were so short speech therapists that they were like, if you work for us for 3 years, we will pretty much give you all the money you need for school. And so it was like a stipend, so I didn't have to pay for grad school really,
Wow.
And I even had a little extra money to travel before I had to actually start work. So it was a really great deal. I'm like, oh yeah, they're going to pay for my grad school and I get a job. It's like no brainer.
Send it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So then we get to LA and you start speech therapy there. Your son came in 2012. Let's go back to young Jeaneen and where your story really begins and what I think fathers really need to pay attention to. So can you take us back to your younger days when your father was around and kind of we can start from there?
Yeah. So my parents got divorced before I was even 2 years old.
Wow.
Okay. And I remember one of my youngest memories that I have with my dad is I was probably maybe 4 or so, and we had gone to like the mall. And I remember I was so excited to be out there with my dad. I was jumping around behind his car and I jumped right into his muffler. And I had a muffler burn on above my knee. And that's one of my memories with him. And I remember he took care of me then. And there aren't that many memories of him taking care of me when I was, just with him. Okay. But like I was telling you before, when I went to elementary school, he owned a gas station that was 2 blocks away.
Okay.
And when I was kind of old enough to ride the bus home and be at, after school by myself kind of thing, I would go to his gas station and go visit him. And he'd be like, oh yeah, I'll come visit you. And he never did. It was like this kind of relationship where I was always reaching out. When you think about like a kid in elementary school, what was it, like 2nd to 6th grade?
Right.
Trying to reach out to my dad and would always kind of give me a little bit of like, oh yeah, I'll come visit you. I'll pick you up. And I don't know if he reached out to my mom. I don't know, because she never nurtured my relationship with him because they were both very grudge holding people. I learned that later on, like she wanted child support and he didn't pay it or something. And they had this very much like this grudge against each other where as an adult now, I know that the only person they were really hurting was me because I didn't, I just thought my dad didn't want to hang out with me, didn't want to spend time with me. And I don't know if my mom, I don't know what their conversation was because she never talked about it. And funny enough, when I went to high school, the house where he lived was a block away from my high school. And I would I went to his house before graduation. I said, hey, would you like to come to my high school graduation? And he told me no. And when I had, I applied to schools for colleges and I applied to 5 colleges. I got into all of them, but my mom let me apply to them without even like really considering that I really wanted to go away to college, outside of Hawaii. And she's like, we don't have money, you can apply to them, but you're not going to go, kind of thing. But I'm like, well, maybe if I asked my dad, will you, you didn't pay child support. Can you help me with college? And he told me no. So there are all these things where I would reach out to my dad and, not have that support from him.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting way to grow up as a female, as a girl, and not have a father figure in your life. So I think that was really instrumental in how I grew up.
Yeah, it's a lot of times we talk about presence, right? That's one of our biggest things, is trying to work on being present as a father. Having him around, and almost, you're trying to work for present father, you're trying to work for that relationship. But even to hear you say that, even provision, like simple provision of school and things that you may need, were not necessarily in his forefront. It seems to Oscar, it seems foreign, right? Because at the bare minimum, one of the reasons I started the podcast was because the one thing I knew I could be good at is providing. I will go and provide. We know that, as you're mentioning, and as I'm sure you'll continue, provision is not the only thing that I owe my daughters, right? But it's at least a bare minimum. And for you to be searching for that, I can't imagine how that would have felt as little as I think you said, second, third grade, and you're walking around going to the store to go meet him, to go spend time with him. I just can't imagine how that would have made you feel and what impact that had for you at the moment, and then obviously in later life.
Yeah, looking back, it's like, you have this hope, right? As a young girl, like, oh, my dad is here. I can see him. I'm like, I would tell everybody at the gas station, he's my dad, like I'm his daughter. But the reciprocal relationship wasn't there, right? He didn't give me any kind of reassurance outside of very surface words, like I'll come see you. He never showed any action. And I think that was very hurtful, in a sense where I became such a person that wanted to please, right? I wanted to do really good because I didn't want to let people down, because I didn't want, to be, I guess, turned away or neglected so that, I think it really affected how I learned how to have relationships with men or boys or whatever as growing up. And, I've done a lot of work on myself. And, I told you before, when people ask me, do you have any siblings? I'm like, yeah, I have. My mom was married 3 times. And my dad was married 3 times. So I have an older brother from my mom and dad's first marriage. I grew up with my mom's first son. He's my brother, Jason. But my dad's side, I have a brother, half brother Thomas, who I didn't grow up with, but I reconnected with him when I was like 18, working at a restaurant as a hostess. I ended up seating him at a table, and then later on he's like, "Are you Russell Tang's daughter?" And I go, "Yeah," because I'm your brother Thomas. It was such a weird, and we grew up after that. We were adults at that point, and we were acquaintances for a while. And we lost touch. We reconnected, and now I've lost touch with him again. But as a younger, like in my 20s, I was doing this Chinese pageant in Hawaii, and one of the assignments was to find out where you were, where your family comes from, right? So I knew where my mom's family side came from, but I was like, well, this is a great opportunity to connect with my dad's side of the family, even though my dad didn't want to be connected with me. I knew where my grandparents had a shop in Chinatown in Hawaii, and my grandfather had he was a CPA, so he had a tax office above the shop. He had the martial arts supply store they had. And I went there one day and I was like, hi, like I'm your granddaughter. And he was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, well, I just want to get to know you. I think he thought I was trying to ask him for money or something. And then like the walls of defense went down and he was like, oh, okay, yeah. Do you want to have lunch with grandma like tomorrow, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. So in my kind of early mid-20s to even into my 30s, they met my son before they passed away. I still would see them. You know, we had a connection, and I would see them. And I remember once when I was leaving their house, I went to the garage to my car, and there was a young man there. And from my father's third marriage, I knew I had a younger brother and a younger half-sister, brother and a half-sister. And something just told me this is my younger half-brother, probably. I don't know. And I was like, are you Riley? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm your half-sister, Jeaneen. And he was like, what? And literally until that moment, he didn't even know I existed.
Oh, wow.
Like, that is how much my father did not acknowledge my existence. Maybe, you know, like, part of me thinks he has like this underlying guilt about things. And yeah, like literally did not acknowledge to my younger siblings that I even existed in the world.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me. And yeah, it's insane.
Wow. Have you ever, is he still alive?
Yeah, I believe he's still alive. And a handful of years, he had a lot of health ailments. My mom, I don't know how she keeps up with his status, but she was like, oh, he's in the hospital. And part of me wanted to go to the hospital. And I felt like a lot of his health ailments and she has fibromyalgia and some other things, back pain and all this stuff. I feel like both of, you know, health is so much associated with stress and what you hold on to in life, I believe, you know? So like part of me was thinking that a lot of his health ailments might have stemmed from holding on to grief and guilt and grudges. Yeah. So I was actually going to go and just to the hospital and be like, you know, like, I don't hold anything against you.
Right.
Like at that time, I think I hadn't moved on as far as understanding that he didn't want me a part of his life, to be a part of his life. And, you know, going back to that Chinese pageant that I did, I bought him tickets and I went to his house to see, hey, you know, just one more chance. Do you want to come to this pageant? And his reply was like, what are you doing here? I don't want you in my life. Like, what do you like? He was like, why do you think I want to go? I don't want you in my life. And I was like, do you not love me because you're mad at my mom? And he was like, well, if you put it that way, then yes. And I remember I was so hurt and pissed off. I swore at him quite a bit. And I remember calling my older half brother Thomas, because we were still acquaintances at that time. And he was like, well, he wasn't really an amazing dad for him as well. And pretty absent, but a lot more present than with me. Absolutely.
Right.
I was so boggled by the response that like, you can really just deny your flesh and blood. Yeah. Because you have a grudge against somebody, because you have a grudge against their mother. It was very hurtful. Yeah.
I'm sorry. That I couldn't imagine what a daughter would feel from father denying them. And to your point of earlier, forgetting the real victim of a grudge of that magnitude. I'd have to say the word is magnitude, because to have a grudge with another person and then to put you by association in that seems really, really big, like something that just shouldn't be. Now, do you know much of his background?
Not a whole lot. My mom will talk about things like I'm supposed to know it, and I'm like,
right.
We've never talked about my dad. Like, you know, I know he has siblings. he did kung fu. So I know, like, there's this affinity for, have you heard of the lion dance? Like the
Mm-mm.
kung fu groups will do this lion dance, this Chinese lion dance. And there's this affinity for, I have an affinity for the lion dance and the drumming and everything.
Okay.
Because I think it's associated with him.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my question was referring to, something that I've learned probably within the last few years, and especially as I interview people in the podcast. We all are given this bag with a playbook, right? Like, it's not an excuse. Some people use it as an excuse, but it's not an excuse. It's just the playbook and I think the word is baggage, right? Like that baggage you were given by your parents, whether they were good parents, bad parents, it's all in there, right? And all the information that came from that bag as a parent. And, growing up as a kid, many times, I'm sure, even with your mom, like you think like, why are they like this? Or why do they do this? Or why do they do that? Right. And you can't understand their yeses or nos, their rules sometimes, and all these different things. And more I come to realize, well, everybody comes with a bag, but how heavy does that bag have to be prior to that? And then at what point, at some point, you have to take ownership of that bag and start removing the stuff you don't want to pass on to your children with that bag, right? It's evident to me that you are doing that. You're working on yourself because this is just tremendous amount of stuff in your bag that you've worked through, because I assume it's not what you want to pass on to your child either. And that's where my question was stemming is, do we know what was in his bag? Do we know the background of him and this is not to excuse anything, of course. It's just an understanding, because I think it's important for fathers to realize just the tremendous position that we're in, and the things we do and don't do have just a magnifying effect on people's lives, particularly our daughters.
Yeah, I don't know what was exactly in his bag. I think my mom would kind of hint towards that he was not, like, he wasn't neglected by his parents. I don't think he was, abused or anything like that. I think he was, my mom would kind of hint towards that my grandmother would baby him or take, do too much for him or something. So I don't really know. And, I've never had an adult conversation with my dad.
Yeah.
And like one of the times I went to go visit my grandmother, literally my dad was sitting in her living room watching TV. And I saw him. I peeked my head and I saw him. He was just stoically looking forward. He could hear me in the kitchen. He just did not acknowledge I was there. And so I didn't acknowledge that he was there either. I just, I could have been like, hey, I'm right here. You're not even saying anything, but part of me was like, well, if he doesn't want to talk to me, I don't need to talk to him. And I just continued on having my conversation with my grandmother, and as if it didn't, our interaction didn't happen at all. It didn't exist. And I don't know if that was a high road or just like being indifferent to it at that point.
Almost a defense mechanism at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. You're trying to, you got to put up a wall at some point.
Yeah.
And how would you feel at that moment? And how do you think that had an impact? Not necessarily that specific moment, but just those types of moments. How did you feel then, and how do you think it impacted you where you are now?
Yeah, I remember that specific moment when he was watching TV. I didn't feel like hurt or crushed. I felt kind of like I was strong at that moment for some reason. Like I wasn't breaking down. Because the time that I saw him before that was when I had offered him those tickets to the pageant. And that was just overwhelmingly just crushing.
Yeah, to hear those actual words come out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like the indifference of like, never hugging me or never trying to console me and like, I'm sorry I never visited you and stuff. So those were like, so from that point where I offered him the tickets to seeing him sitting in front of the TV, not looking at me, I was a very different person by then. And I think I did build up a lot of walls at that point. Yeah.
And was this before or after you had already started kind of working through some of these issues on your own?
Which part?
That situation where he was in the couch.
I think I had acknowledged that his role or his absence in my life was impacting me. So I feel like I wasn't truly in my path of personal development yet, but I was starting it, as far as like, because my younger self would have just been so upset that he was there and not wanting to acknowledge me, where, I must have been in my later 20s by then, I would say.
Right.
And I was just a stronger person in general. Like, just, you go through stuff in your life and you're just like, well, not everything is going to crumble you.
Right. Yeah, you can let it crush you or you can figure out how to climb above it for sure. You had mentioned that as you grew up and, in your relationships, you started to kind of be a pleaser or someone who wanted to please. And I assume that is almost a way of you kind of trying to prove your worth to someone because you were not. But can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, like I feel like I never want to let people down. Right. You grow up with abandonment issues and you don't want people to be upset at you. And, growing up in an Asian household too, everybody's very non-confrontational, right? So you don't want to have arguments or verbal fights or physical fights or even, you just don't want to rock the boat a lot of times. And so I grew up wanting to do my best, I was a very good student. I was, wanting to do lots of sports in high school and just prove that I was worth something, that I could be in the top whatever percent of my group, because then it would make people see that I was valuable as a person. But I don't think I was thinking about that, consciously, right? But looking back at it, absolutely, I was trying to have some kind of worth.
Absolutely.
To, subconsciously show that even though he wasn't in my life, I was subconsciously probably trying to show him or my mom or whoever that I was worth it.
Wow. If you heard a father, if you knew of a father, maybe taking a similar path as your father, knowing that they have children, not necessarily just girls, but obviously we know that from many studies that the father has a big impact, both negative and positive, on their daughters.
Hey, if you enjoy the Daughter Podcast, you'll love what we've got waiting for you at daughterpodcast.com. As soon as you visit, you'll be prompted to join our new email newsletter, a resource packed with valuable insights, practical tips, and powerful perspectives straight from our podcast episodes and incredible guests. Don't miss out on the chance to join the community and strengthen your journey as a father. Visit daughterpodcast.com today and subscribe, because great dads never stop growing.
If you knew of a father in that past, what would you advise? Given your experience.
Yeah, I would definitely advise them to be as present as possible, because I feel like the lack of a father figure in my life was so impactful on my self-esteem, on how I perceived relationships with partners and stuff, and just having that self-worth. Like I would really urge them to be present, be as positive, and think about, like, if how would you want your daughter to be treated? You're treating their, even if you're not with the mother, how would you want your daughter to be treated by their spouse or by a boyfriend or something? And to kind of see that it's a domino effect. By you not being there, it's going to affect how your daughter is going to be treated by other people. Because, I learned also that I allow a lot to happen because I wanted to not be abandoned, because I wanted to be accepted. You tend to be a pushover in a sense, right? You tend to be agreeable. And when in actuality, like, if you have someone who's a great father figure, they'll teach you that don't take anybody's BS. You don't get pushed around. You are your own person, and you need to stand up for yourself. And, I think in relationships that I have, I feel like I would just do too much to overcompensate for, the relationship, as far as, be too over accommodating, and then they would see me as being too soft, like, so there's this balance of, like, you need to have a backbone, and you need to be decisive. So I tend to, I feel like I tended to be indecisive because, or appear to be indecisive because I was so accommodating, right?
Right.
Like, what do you want to eat? I'll eat anything, which I do. I'll eat anything. But, it's like, people want you to be decisive in life. And I think that that was part of the reason why I became who I am.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously, I'm sure you like who you are now, right? I mean, I don't think that's in question. But it does sound like, to me as a father, that you missed a voice that he could have gave you, right? Because you're saying that you almost don't, you find yourself not having a voice, not advocating for yourself, because you're trying to be amicable to anything else from anybody else. Where you're right. I mean, I have conversations with my daughters where we talk about being kind, but kindness is not necessarily, being folding backwards for anything. It's just, you be kind to people, but you stand up for yourself and you have a voice for yourself. And you, when we go to restaurants, they want me to order for them. And I say, no, you have to order for yourself because you have a voice and you have to say it. Even my 5-year-old, which is a little bit harder to do sometimes if she's not feeling up to it, right? Because she's a 5-year-old. But it does sound like that lack of a father figure left you with almost a lack of voice.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, my mom did the best that she could. She was a single mom. She worked a lot. And, there are obviously ways she could have been better, but she did the best she could.
Of course.
But the confidence, I feel like I lacked confidence growing up. Like, I felt like I didn't really, I'm a good leader, but I'm one of those, like, leaders who, what do they call it? Like, they can lead, but they don't want to really be the one that says, hi, I want to be the leader.
Right.
The reluctant leader. Yeah. And, so I feel like if I had a better example in my life, I would have been more of a leader who wanted to lead rather than I'll lead if I have to, but I don't want to lead because I don't have the confidence to lead. I feel like there's so much leadership abilities within myself, but I lack the confidence to be like, I can do this for my group or my team. And, I think also just having another parent there, because, when my mom was working all the time, she never made it to my games.
Right.
It would have been great to have somebody in my corner to be cheering from the stands and,
right. All the things that we've talked about this in the podcast before many times with a group of men I talked to as well. We're working to be better fathers. So we try to figure out like these grand gestures of like moments, right? Oh, we're going to go here and do this. And I've now interviewed, including yourself, the first 3 females in our podcast, right? Because everything else has been just fathers trying to figure out perspectives and all these things. And one thing that it has been just so evidently clear, and especially in what your story is, you just wanted those little moments and you didn't have those. And for us to be present to be here, but maybe not present for those little moments that my other guests have like, oh yeah, I remember doing this, and this. There was nothing grand. It was just something. He was there. It was something that he gave me that I remember that he probably doesn't remember, but it's still there. And I'm picking up from you and your story that just having him wanting to be there would have been a world of a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I remember I would go to friends' houses, right? And they would have a father and a mother. And when I had a boyfriend in high school, I would see his father and mother, and I would kind of try to adopt, like, oh, that's what a father figure is, as far as like understanding what the role of a father was,
right.
In my family unit, because I would see it on TV or in movies, and I would see it at my friends' families' houses, I didn't really have a real male figure that was like the father. My mom had a really good friend who was male, but he never tried to father me. Like he never, was never like this father figure, but he was a male there, but not anybody who gave me advice or anything like that at all. So like having friends who had both parents present was very eye-opening. Like it was like, oh, that's what fathers are supposed to do in a sense, because up to that point, I have this imagination of what fathers should be, right? And my son's father and I are not together, but I told my son's father, it's important for you to be here. And he tries to be here as much as possible. A lot of times his work takes him out of the States, but when he's wondering, like, is it better if I'm not in the picture or whatever, whenever he has a doubt, I'm like, no, it's always better for you to be in the picture, because I want our son to have both parents, and I want our son to know that he's loved by both parents,
right.
Whether you can spend, an hour with him or play with him or whatever it is. It's important. And, that's one of the big things when we had our son. We weren't really, we had dated for about 4 years, seriously broke up, and then got back together, had this child, and decided to co-parent. And we weren't really together, but I knew that it was important to have both parents.
Wow. And I mean, what a way to learn that, right? With your background. That's just amazing. Just an amazing story. And I think it's such a highlighting concept for fathers to take in, that our job is just too important. It's just too important to abdicate the duties that you're responsible for. And I strive, and this is with my wife's help, because I'm pretty much a recluse. Like when I'm home, I like my home. I like my space. My wife is very good at inviting friends over or inviting those kids that are our daughter's friends to be around and whatever. And at one point earlier in our marriage, she had said, like, I want them to be in our house and I want to be able to see who their friends are. But then also she had mentioned, like, and she said, and also some of these kids like don't have a family like we have. So why not show them that? And I didn't really take her that much seriously, to be honest with you, again, just because I'm, knuckle dragger, and I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But the more and more, my oldest daughter is now 13. And the more and more that I've learned through that process and had friends over here and learned about her friends. And yes, there may be that friend that has a story like yours that can benefit from seeing what a family unit can be, right? What a family unit can be. And hopefully if I can influence at all one of those kids to say, he's doing good by his daughters, then I think it's winning for the world, right? Because I'm not their father, but I think unknowingly I've had the chance to do that. And now knowing, I'm like, oh man, I hope I presented well. Like I hope I represented well, because my goal with the podcast and what we're doing is truly to hopefully avoid stories like yours, right? Because we want to be there for our kids. I want to advocate for fathers to be there for their kids, sons and daughters, just be there. And your story is just such an amazing story that I can't thank you enough for giving that story to us. That's hard. I don't know. I would never know that feeling. And you're amazing for giving us that story.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Like going back to you saying that kids will come over and maybe they have a similar background, right? Like my son's dad was an uncle to many of his nieces and nephews when he has another son who's 29. Okay. So he had a son when he was 19. And some of his older son's cousins grew up in single parent homes as well, but didn't have their dad present. So he was a father figure to them, right? So he knows how to be the father figure. He would take the kids out and do all these kinds of things. And it wasn't a substitute for a dad there, but it was somebody who was trying to be present. So if you have males who are uncles or friends of people with single parent children, like there's such a role for a male figure in children's lives. And they didn't have somebody to step up, my brother moved out of the house when he was 18 and I was 8. We're 10 years apart. So, a lot of times he wasn't around as well. And he's a great dad to his girls. His girls one just graduated from college and one is still in college now. And he's a great dad, amazing husband to his wife and everything. And I wish I had him around more when I was growing up. Yeah. But he was kind of already out of the house and all that stuff.
Very tough. And we bring it all back. So now you're in LA. Your son is doing well. He's almost 13. Crazy to think about, right? My daughter just turned 13 this year. So just mind blowing how quickly they grow. And aside from 24 years of speech therapy, or being a speech therapist, I see a book behind you that you have also gotten to. I don't know how you do all these things. It just sounds like so much, and yet you are thriving. So tell me a little about the book.
Yeah, it's I'll bring it closer. It's called Play Dumb and Sabotage, and it's there's a subtitle. It says mindfully under anticipating the child's needs and creating opportunities to practice language. Oh, and doing speech therapy for 24 years, I've seen a lot of different patterns, right? And a lot of these kids are being tended to, right? So I remember when you were a first-time dad, you probably wanted to make sure your child was fed, where they were dry, they were clothed, they had the toys they wanted. You know, you didn't want them to cry in public because, you know, that'd say that you were a bad parent, right? You're like, oh my gosh, this child's crying. But in actuality, a lot of times we often do too much. We over anticipate what they need. And so we have a lot of these kids who are growing up that are, you know, they should be saying your first word by 1 year. You should be combining 2 words, 3 words by 2 years, and then speaking in short sentences by 3, right? There's this whole spectrum. Some kids progress faster and some kids progress slower. But a lot of times for early intervention speech therapy, we'll get them around 18 months to 2 years old, or even 2.5. And these kids have not really they haven't really developed their expressive language. They are receptive, they understand quite a bit. And physically, they're running around, they can climb, they can jump and do all this stuff. But verbally, they're not really saying much, or they might be starting to babble but not have clear speech, or not really having a lot of single words. And a lot of times it's because the parents know what the kid wants, right? That means, they want milk.
Right, yes.
They want that ball. So they get tended to like, the child makes a sound, any vocalization or reach or a cry. And the parent is right there with like 2 different toys that they might love, or like all the snacks. So I wanted to be able to create a greater impact on the world. And, you know, being the mother of a disabled child is time consuming. You know, trying to work with kids, doing speech therapy. I only can see so many kids during the week, right? I'm only one person. So I was like, what is the best way to duplicate myself? And I thought about going back to school, getting a PhD and teaching at a university, but I'd only be teaching other speech therapy students, which is great in a sense. But the audience I really want to help is those parents and caregivers and even early educators. You would think that preschool teachers are educated on how to, you know, demonstrate and teach language, but a lot of them aren't.
Oh, wow.
The strategies are not really taught to them very well. And so by targeting the parents and the caregivers, early educators, anybody who works with young kids, I think that's really how you really impact speech therapy, language development, and hopefully decrease the number of kids who need speech therapy. Because unfortunately, I will never be without a job. Like people say, you know, aren't you worried that if this book takes off, that you won't have a job? And I was like, no, there are so many kids that need speech therapy. And there are so many kids who will need speech therapy truly, like kids with autism, kids with Down syndrome, kids with cerebral palsy, all these other, you know, congenital defects that will need speech therapy, like truly need speech therapy. So we could get rid of speech therapy for all these other kids who are normal developing, but just are late talkers. I think that'd be so impactful. And also, you know, give these strategies to parents in general, because a lot of times parents will send their kids to speech therapy and, you know, the kid will go into speech therapy for an hour, come back out. They really don't know what happens, right? They don't know truly how to do speech therapy at home with their child, because they weren't in the room a lot of times, right? And they don't get provided homework and strategies well. But if you have this little handout book, this handbook, it's very conversational, and every chapter has activities. It's like having a speech therapist in your home that you can refer to anytime you need.
Very cool. And you're absolutely right. You're starting at the base of the problem, and then you're going to make room for the folks that are absolutely going to need it, as you mentioned, because of other issues. So that is, that I guess I've never really heard it said that way. How do I multiply myself? That's a very key phrase there.
Right. Because I have, 24 years of experience, right? Experience goes a long way, because a lot of times, you'll have your child go to speech therapy, and if they go to a clinic, oftentimes they're being seen by a speech therapy assistant, right? And those speech therapy assistants can be amazing, but oftentimes they can't really adjust the nuances in therapy in that moment, right? So it's like if you can get a baseline of how to present different strategies, how to use that in the home, I think that will help the parents grasp a better understanding of what speech therapy is, what strategies and tricks they could use with their child to help that move along quicker. Speech therapy is not cheap if you're paying out of pocket, right? And for early intervention, it is covered. It is provided from 0 to 3 years old. And if they do qualify after 3 years old, they'll get speech therapy in the schools. But because there's so many kids who need speech therapy, sometimes kids who are mildly impaired might not continue therapy at school age because they aren't impaired enough. But then they need to go and maybe get, speech therapy privately, which is, if you have insurance, it might cover some of it, or you might be out of pocket. And so there's a whole lot that goes into that.
Well, it sounds like an amazing tool to have specifically for those parents with little tykes running around. And is there a website where folks can find this, or can you give us kind of where we can find you in the webs?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to my website. It's playdumandsabotage.com.
Okay.
And on there, they can connect with my Instagram. My personal is JT808, and my professional is Play Dumb and Sabotage. There's links to the book on Amazon if they want to do that. It's available on any platform. So if they do ebooks, they can on any ebook platform or audiobook platform as well. Oh,
fantastic.
And I'll be posting, later on, I'll be posting this podcast on there as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
anything that I've done, they can find on my website.
Perfect. And we will have all those links that I will get from you, Jeaneen, and I will post them in the show notes so that folks can easily go through and start clicking and getting on to this amazing tool that you've just created for everybody and multiplied yourself. This is really cool. Well, Jeaneen, we're getting close to our time. What would you leave the Doddard community with, from your perspective? What do you want to leave us with as we depart this conversation that could probably go for another hour?
It's been such a pleasure talking with you. I think one thing I would love dads to know is that to let their ego aside a lot of times. Because I feel like a lot of times the pushback, especially with like speech therapy, with boys or girls, I might say, we might suggest that speech therapy is needed for a child. And, more often than not, the dads are the ones to say, well, what can you do for my child that I can't? Right. Rather than, and it's no criticism about the parent, the dad or the mom or anything like that. It's just that we can help make your child better. So it's not so much like, you don't have to feel like there's defensiveness about help. Don't be afraid to ask for help or to have an inkling that your child might not, be striving in one area. Because if you can get help from a professional, then it's going to help your child just close that gap and, progress into an amazing adult human that you want them to be. So, put your ego aside, I think. And also, just know that you being flexible and open, I think that's really important because you are so important in your child, whether you have a daughter or a son. And, I really would like, all parents to know that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeaneen, for your story, for opening up to us and such a personal story that you gave us. I truly believe this is sometimes what we need to hear to make sure that we are getting on the right path for our children. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to have you, and I hope that we can push this book out and it can help a lot of people as well.
Amazing. Thank you very much for having me today.
Of course. And for all of you guys, again, we'll have all those links for Jeaneen in the show notes. Please click those links, go to those sites, follow Jeaneen, and use the tools that she has created for us. Until next time, we'll see you all later.
This has been the Doddard Podcast. Be sure and share this show with a friend. Like, subscribe, follow us on social media, and leave us a review. For everything Girl Dad, head over to daughterpodcast.com. That's daughterpodcast.com.